BNSF's Needles subdivision traverses one of the hottest and driest places in North America, the Mojave Desert. Running nearly 170 miles between Barstow and Needles, California, this transcontinental mainline boasts over 80 trains in a 24-hour period. Join 7 Idea Productions on an action-packed tour of this high-density railroad. If desert running sounds easy, it isn't. Trains must battle 2 big grades as they cross the Mojave: Ash Hill and Goffs Hill. Part of BNSF's busy Southern Transcon, the variety of trains will not disappoint. Hotshot Z trains, long, heavy double stacks, grain, coal, auto racks, ethanol, and an army of manifests heading to and from the Barstow classification yard. Union Pacific shows up on the west end via trackage rights dating back to the early 1900s. And the Arizona and California branch line brings business from the southeast at Cadiz. Get ready for nearly 2.5 hours of hot railroading action from the California desert. This is BNSF's Mojave Mainline, the Needles Sub. Our tour of the Needles subdivision officially begins at Barstow, milepost 745.9 on the former Santa Fe Transcon. From here, we will continue east for 167.5 miles to Needles near the Arizona border. Highlights include Daggett and the junction with the Union Pacific's line to Salt Lake City via Las Vegas. Around a dozen trains use this junction daily, adding to the variety. Continuing east, we will pass the stations of Minneola, Newberry, Hector, West and East Pisgah, Lavic, Ludlow, and Ash Hill. East of Summit, the track split with eastbound Main 2 dropping downgrade to West Siberia. Main 1 curves away to the north through the former station of Klondike, eventually meeting up with Main 2 again at West Siberia. This is a popular place to catch trains working both up and downhill, often at the same time, and we will spend some extra time here. The tracks continue downgrade through East Siberia, Bagdad, and Amboy, reaching the lowest point between Barstow and Needles near Saltus. At Cadiz, we explore the junction with the Arizona and California Railroad out of Parker, Arizona. Cars are interchanged with the BNSF, and repo moves from Phoenix also use the line. Beginning a climb up Goffs Hill, the double-track main line runs northeast, following the Fenner Valley through Danby, Essex, and Fenner, before reaching the highest point on the subdivision, near East Goffs. From here, it's another 1.4% downgrade through Homer and Bannock. At Arrowhead Junction, mains 1 and 2 split again for around 4 miles to Ibis, then curve through Klinefelter and Java. Triple track running begins again at West Needles, as the rails drop toward the Colorado River near the eastern end of the subdivision. From its grand opening in the spring of 1976, the Barstow Classification Yard was renowned as a state-of-the-art facility, rivaling Southern Pacific's West Colton Yard near San Bernardino. The hump yard sits on 600 acres and can handle over 1,800 cars in a 24-hour period. This vantage point is from Barstow Hill, overlooking the southeast side. Switch crews remain busy, operating vintage SD40-2s, some with slugs, as cars are shuffled throughout the many miles of yard tracks located here. From the west, traffic from the Los Angeles area comes in via the Cajon subdivision, while the adjoining Mojave sub filters in trains from Northern California, as well as Oregon and Washington State. Locomotives are fueled and serviced as needed and placed on outbound trains. Light power make their way through the yard, where they will be used on an eastbound in one of the departure tracks. The Norfolk Southern 7233 is a former Union Pacific SD90 43AC, numbered 8003. Day and night, the Barstow Yard remains a busy hub of activity on the west end of the Needles subdivision. Intermodal trains make up the lion's share of traffic through Barstow, and a constant parade of double-stack and hotshot Z trains make a quick stop for a crew change before continuing their journey on the transcontinental route. During our week-long visit of the Needles subdivision, we saw train counts as high as 82 in a 24-hour period, not including the dozen or so UP trackage rights trains thrown into the mix between Barstow and Daggett. Classic neon lights of the nearby Route 66 motel remind us that we will be following the famous Mother Road as we make our way east to Needles. An iconic building that has been a gem of Barstow is the Harvey House Train Depot, located near the old Santa Fe Yard, east of the Hump facility. Opened on February 22, 1911, after an earlier depot burned, it was given the name the Casa del Desierto, meaning House of the Desert. It boasted 8 passenger platforms and hosted famous Golden Age passenger trains such as the Grand Canyon Limited, California Limited, City of Los Angeles, the Chief, and many others. During World War II, it played an important role in serving the many troop trains which plied the rails. Service declined in the following years, and the Casa del Desierto was officially closed by the Santa Fe in 1973. It suffered heavy earthquake damage in 1992 and was purchased by the city of Barstow and eventually restored to the tune of $8 million. Today, the classic Harvey House Railroad Depot contains city offices as well as the Western America Railroad Museum and the Route 66 Mother Road Museum. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1975. An evening stroll along the passenger platform in the triple-track main opens like a soundstage. A high green shows on Main 3 for our first act, BNSF 4002 East, which has just taken on a fresh crew and slowly departs for a nighttime run across the Mojave Desert to Needles. The lights of a westbound appear through a large cut beyond the signal bridge. Both trains dim their lights for the meet. Looking west, a pair of switchers continue working into the night, while an eastbound stack train slowly departs on Main 2. A higher priority Z train has just recruited on Main 3 and will be sent ahead of the stacker. Its headlights briefly illuminate the sea of containers. While the stack train gets a yellow on Main 2, BNSF 7201 West approaches on Main 1. The multitude of passenger trains which once called on Barstow Station are long gone, replaced by Amtrak's Southwest Chief. Eastbound train number 4 makes a nocturnal stop at 10:30 p.m. on its way to Chicago. The next morning, the classic station looks grand in the cool sunshine, and we tip our hat to the city of Barstow for preserving this classic piece of history. Although not as old, other historic pieces are on display thanks to the Western America Railroad Museum. This is a 1938 Santa Fe horse car used to ship racehorses and their trainers in style between racetracks across the country. An EMD FP45 shows off the classic Santa Fe war bonnet colors. Built in 1967 and numbered 105, it represents Santa Fe's preferred power for their premier LA to Chicago streamliners. SD40-2 number 9950 sits right behind the FP45. It was originally built for the Missouri Pacific in 1980 and now wears Union Pacific colors. One of the most interesting locomotives on the roster is the ATSF 1460. This one-of-a-kind Baldwin switcher refitted with an EMD prime mover is referred to as the Beep, short for Baldwin Jeep. Other rolling stock include the Arizona and California heavyweight car, number 58, Union Pacific CA-8 caboose, and Santa Fe CE-8 extended vision caboose. Elephant Mountain appears as a small rise behind the triple-track mainline at West Daggett, milepost 739.6 on the Needles sub. UP 8820 East heads for home rails, and a crew change at Yermo, just a few miles from our location. Union Pacific has trackage rights over BNSF between Riverside and Daggett, going back to 1905. This allows UP trains from Southern California access to their former LA and SL trackage to Salt Lake City via Las Vegas. The desert market stands under threatening skies in the center of Daggett, what's left of a western town founded in the 1880s after silver was discovered nearby. The Southern Pacific arrived in 1882, building rails east out of Mojave, which is today's BNSF. In 1903, the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake built their own line from Las Vegas to a junction which now serves the UP. While the town appears to be dying a slow death, the railroad could not be more alive. BNSF 144 East leads the Cadiz turn through Daggett behind 3 GP60Ms and 2 straight GP60s. The Cadiz turn works 5 days a week out of Barstow. In addition to serving a few customers on the line, it picks up interchange traffic from the Arizona and California Railroad at Cadiz, 88 miles to the east. 2 westbounds hold on Main 1 for their turn to enter Barstow, as well as a UP waiting to come out of Yermo. It's a typical afternoon on the busy Needles sub. Waiting for the light to improve, we catch BNSF 8071 West on the point of an international container train bound for the ports. Returning on a warm, sunny afternoon, BNSF 4238 leads a hot eastbound Z train through Daggett, made up almost entirely of trailers. Z-trains are the highest priority on the railroad, with time-sensitive freight that has to make it to its destination within a specific number of hours. They travel light and fast, with usually 5 locomotives on the point and plenty of UPS or FedEx trailers in tow. Stack trains are numerous on the Needles subdivision. Unlike Z trains, they are often longer, heavier, and slower. BNSF 6573 East is one such train. While filming on the Needles subdivision, we saw stacked trains in excess of 16,000 feet in length and weighing in at over 19,000 tons. This train breaks a tape measure at over 12,000 feet and is powered by 7 units, 3 on the point, 2 cut in mid-train, and 2 more shoving on the rear. 6,500 feet behind the head end, BNSF 4120 and 6727 add their combined 8,800 horsepower to the middle of the train. BNSF 4100 and 7325 bring up the rear of the long stack train, giving it a little assist up the short 0.26% grade. A clear block shows for the UP at Daggett. as the dispatcher has lined the train into Yermo on Main 2. UP 5382 approaches the junction with an eastbound autorack train. UP traffic pales in comparison with 80-plus trains per day found on the Needles subdivision. Our train count was around 12 in a 24-hour period, still enough to make for an interesting variety at Daggett. After making a crew change at Yermo, this train will continue over the SEMA subdivision to Las Vegas. But that's a story for another time. Daggett was one of the filmmaking locations for the 1940 picture The Grapes of Wrath, directed by John Ford. We can't help but wonder what it would have been like to look down this street back when giant steam locomotives roamed the earth. Early the next morning, BNSF 8249 leads an eastbound domestic stack train into the sunrise. Another regular appearance are westbound unit grain trains with mid and rear DPs. BNSF 7638 gets a light after patiently waiting at Daggett for a line into Barstow. The Newberry Mountains rise to the south of the main line and Interstate 40. A quarry at Newberry Peak once supplied ballast for the railroad. At Minneola, BNSF 5489 leads an evening Z train west through the desert. An eastbound Z train races through West Newberry. Located near Newberry Springs, ballast was stockpiled and loaded onto rail cars here as needed. As you can see, the rock was pink. It was delivered from a nearby quarry via a 2-mile-long conveyor belt. All that remains today is a wide open space that is freshly graded and some boxcars in storage. As trains travel east across the desert, they experience easy running, with a slight downgrade of around 0.58%. At Hector, milepost 712.8, the elevation is 1,900 feet above sea level. 2 sets of headlights shimmer in the distance, indicating 2 eastbounds. The first, BNSF 6985, leads a manifest out of Barstow. The Cadiz Mountains set the backdrop for an eastbound vehicle train as it passes a lonely grade crossing at Hector. The 3 big diesels and string of 89-foot auto racks shrink in the vastness of the desert. Hector marks the beginning of a 1% grade as the double-track main bends to the south at Pisgah. West Pisgah is milepost 707.3, and we have traveled 38 miles since leaving Barstow. BNSF 3858 West passes beneath high power lines as it heads down grade on Main 1. The stack train meets BNSF 6516 East coming up Main 2. Pisgah gets its name from the nearby Pisgah crater. The extinct volcano raises 353 feet above the desert floor and gives us a good view of our surroundings. This was the site of a cinder quarry used for making ballast for the Santa Fe. Looking northwest, another westbound stack train crosses the dry Troy Lake bed. At the base of the distant mountains, traffic on Interstate 15 can be seen between Barstow and Las Vegas. Union Pacific's SEMA subdivision roughly parallels the freeway before cutting through the very scenic Afton Canyon, but we'll save that for another day. Here, the desert reminds us of pictures sent back to Earth by the Mars rover. Barren, rocky cliffs of the lava bed mountains jet out of the arid desert, accompanied by the black lava flows near Lavic. What little vegetation grows here really stands out against the sea of dead rock. To the northeast, a westbound stack train makes its way across the desert above the lava flow from the Pisgah volcano. Interstate 40 traffic can be seen above the train, now on the north side of the tracks, as it will be for the next 84 miles. Moving to where the train disappeared, we look back at the dark features of the Pisgah crater. This is East Pisgah, milepost 705.2. BNSF 3848 takes domestic stacks west to San Bernardino. Continuing our eastward trek toward Ludlow, trains curve through a small cut near Lavic at milepost 702. BNSF 6882 heads west through the elevated curve. In a perfectly timed meet, BNSF 7362 heads east. The rails curve down a 1% grade to Ludlow, a former water stop for the Santa Fe. The town grew in importance as the southern railhead for the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad, which shipped borax out of Death Valley and Beatty, Nevada. It also served the Ludlow and Southern, which ran south to a gold mine. Both railroads ceased by the 1940s, and the town relied on Route 66 for business. It died with the coming of Interstate 40, leaving abandoned houses and streets for the desert to reclaim. BNSF 8353 leads a Barstow manifest past the crossovers at Ludlow. BNSF 8389 crosses over from Main 1 to Main 2 on a cloudy morning. The empty grain hoppers originated in Swanson, California, and are bound for Hutchinson, Kansas. Ludlow still serves as a staging area for maintenance of way equipment. A track gang has been working between Lavic and Ash Hill, and some of their equipment rests in a house track next to the crossovers. Main 2 is out of service between here and East Pisgah due to the track work, forcing westbounds to wait at the crossovers for eastbound traffic to clear. With a clear signal for Main 1, BNSF 4498 continues west with a loaded coal train. This is train CCO-MCC. It originated at the Carbon Coal Mine near Gallup, New Mexico, and is bound for a cement plant in Cushenberry, California. East of Ludlow, the railroad loosely follows Interstate 40 and Old Route 66 over Ash Hill on a 1.03% grade. BNSF 6087 races down the west side to the Route 66 crossing, while an eastbound is stopped on Main 2. A Y-track can be found at the summit near the crossovers of East Ash Hill, milepost 686.3. For westbounds, it is the apex of a grade that gradually began near Amboy, 25 miles away. The elevation is just shy of 2,000 feet, and through the signal bridge, we get a taste of the country we will be entering as we drop down into the heart of the desert. BNSF 8071 East leads a stack train over the summit of Ash Hill as the railroad pulls away from Interstate 40 for the next 64 miles. As the train tips over the apex, it begins a 1.4% descent toward Siberia, skirting the southern end of the Bristol Mountains to the Cadiz Valley below. With the force of gravity working more in the train's favor, it picks up speed as the rear-end remotes approach the top of the grade. The grade on the eastern climb of Ash Hill is 1.44%. The approach to summit takes westbounds over a fill, then through a cut before arriving at the control point of East Ash Hill. BNSF 8243 takes a manifest through the cut with the help from the Canadian National and CSX Transportation. The train meets BNSF 4511 East with more grain empties. As the engines pass, notice the trailing BNSF 739, which has recently suffered a fire. The empty grain hoppers continue down the hill on the number 2 track on what engineers call the chute. Looking west, BNSF 8243 is just arriving at the summit of Ash Hill. A dwarf signal guards an 8,066-foot siding at Ash Hill, where empty stack wells are currently being stored. BNSF 5506 leads a westbound stack train through the cut, sometimes referred to as the trench. It's the 23rd day of March, and the greasewood is starting to bloom, adding a little splash of color to the desert. Below the cut near Klondike, the east and westbound tracks are on separate alignments. BNSF 8183 East races down the chute on Main 2 toward the former station of Siberia. Not far from the main line, one can find bridge abutments of orange stone, which stand as a monument to an older grade over a dry wash. The initials carved into the cement on this structure read January 8, 1928. A dozen yards away, trains ford the same wash on a newer girder deck bridge. The Needles subdivision is the final sorting ground for trains coming into Southern California. Back in Arizona, each westbound's performance is tested on a 1.42% grade to Yampai, west of Seligman. It is equal to the maximum climb trains will face here. Based on the results, the Needles sub-dispatcher will shuffle faster trains around the slower ones before reaching Barstow. This basically creates the final order in which they will arrive at their West Coast destinations. Setting up between the two main lines, BNSF 6327 leads a westbound vehicle train up Main 1. This is train VBLU SBD. The letter V classifies it as a vehicle train, BLU tells us its origin is Blue Island, Illinois, and SBD is San Bernardino, California. The two GEs on the point appear to have no troubles on the Ash Hill grade, and the train makes good time as it curves through the features of the wide open landscape. A few minutes later, BNSF 8192 East appears out of the trench at Ash Hill. It is symboled the Z SBD ALT9 and is running between San Bernardino and Alliance, Texas. With dynamic brake fans whining, it sails down the chute on track 2. BNSF 7109 West climbs through Klondike on Main 1. This string of mostly J.B. Hunt stacks originated in Alliance, Texas, the destination of the Z train, and is heading for San Bernardino. J.B. Hunt intermodal trains are often designated with a Q, and this train is no exception. It is symboled the QALT SBD. Another eastbound follows the Z9 down the chute as our Q train continues climbing Ash Hill. From the former station at Klondike on Main 1, we can see the cantilever signal bridges at West Siberia. What we cannot see from this angle is the high green for the BNSF 4813 as it leads grain empties down the chute. Westbound double stacks climb through West Siberia. The 4813 continues down the chute, so named for its 1.4% downgrade, without much curvature to slow the train's descent. Throttle setting is usually heavy dynamics, with additional braking applied to the train as needed. The trains meet as the number 1 track begins to pull away from track 2. The great unobstructed views offered by the desert gives us the opportunity to shoot angles not normally possible. These telephoto shots were made with a 650mm lens. This is how the scene looks with the naked eye. The stack train must negotiate two big curves between Siberia and Klondike. This adds extra distance to the route, but reduces the uphill grade for westbounds. The Bullion Mountains rise above the desert floor behind the train. They are part of the 29 Palms Marine Corps base and are off limits to the public. From this distance, we find their rough features striking in the evening light. The train led by BNSF 5648 starts around Klondike Curve, with the dark figure of Dish Hill rising behind it. As the 5648 slowly approaches Klondike, another eastbound distracts us momentarily as it slides down the chute. The train approaches milepost 682. Although it no longer appears on the BNSF timetable, this was a location of the former station of Klondike. As the 5648 continues to the top of Ash Hill, we poke around Klondike and find several empty cans labeled Hercules Black Blasting Powder. We can't help but wonder if this was used by the railroad or in one of the many nearby mines. Another westbound, BNSF 8217 leads a stack train over a dry wash on Bridge 681.6. As the train continues through Klondike, we move farther along the inside of the big curve on the older grade. A westbound ethanol train led by BNSF 4948 rounds the lower curve above West Siberia. The long string of tank cars continue their march up the grade as another day of rail fanning draws to a close. The Mojave is the driest desert in North America, receiving on average less than 13 inches of rain per year. When the rain does come, so does the danger of flash floods, which constantly reshape the landscape. In the spring, the creosote bush, also called greasewood, add a green hue to the desert floor. Far to the east, a westbound stack train labors up grade between East and West Siberia. As it digs in for the climb, an eastbound manifest is spotted emerging from the cut at Ash Hill, while another westbound can be seen reaching the top of the grade. This sequence is a good representation of both main lines. Both trains meet at the start of the grade separation above West Siberia. In a classic shot, the underpowered stack train rounds the big Klondike curve. Again looking to the east, our manifest meets another uphill train between East and West Siberia. A lower angle shows the amount of fill used in the curve on the number 1 track. There is talk of adding a second main here to ease congestion on the hill. Eastbound grain empties head down the chute in yet another meet on the high-density rail line. This is the bottom of the chute on the number 2 track. As mentioned earlier, the nickname was given to this piece of track due to the steep downgrade and gentle curvature. Trains such as this manifest are in heavy dynamics, with some braking applied to the train to maintain the correct speed. These 2 power poles are referred to as the goalposts. Once past the landmark poles, the grade levels out for a few hundred feet. The worst part is over, and the engineer can kick off the train's air. These engines' dynamic brakes should be able to hold the train for the rest of the descent to Bagdad. As the train passes, you can hear the brakes are still applied, but soon they will release as the 3 big ACs keep the manifest in check. The evening sun sinks behind the western mountains, and the blue hour falls upon the desert at West Siberia, a name befitting the remote location. Siberia was a water stop on the Santa Fe and nearby Route 66. Like Ludlow, the town dried up after Interstate 40 opened in 1973. Today, the buildings are gone. Yet another desert ghost town along the busy Transcon. The headlight in the distance announces BNSF 5513 West as it takes a stacked train into the night. Night falls on West Siberia as another eastbound descends the grade. Peering down the valley toward Amboy, a distant westbound climbs the grade near Bagdad. Hearing something coming, we turn to catch BNSF 7825 taking a Z train east. The lava hills set the backdrop for BNSF 7299 West, with Amtrak Genesis Unit number 824 in tow, heading for LA. Continuing down the grade, we arrive at the next former Santa Fe water stop named Bagdad, milepost 669.3. BNSF 7633 leads a westbound manifest for Barstow past the old ghost town. The train makes good time on the 70-mile-per-hour track, but soon will be slowing as the grade increases to 1.42%. Here's a pacing shot of BNSF 6978 West as the hotshot Z9 races through the desert between Amboy and Bagdad. Amboy is yet another former water stop along the old Santa Fe. The classic town has been preserved, including the famous Roy's Cafe, which has been featured in movies and television. The popular landmark draws a lot of visitors who venture off I-40 to see it. Plans for the town are to keep it the way it was during the glory days of the Mother Road, Route 66. Amboy still appears on the BNSF timetable and is a location of a 9,359-foot siding, in addition to the two main tracks. The dip between Amboy and Saltus, the next station to the east, marks the second lowest point on the Needles subdivision, at around 600 feet. The only lower place is Needles itself. Looking west, a total of 4 trains can be seen waiting on Main 2. A stack train east of here is having problems with one of its remote-controlled diesels. The railroad skirts the northern edge of the Cadiz Valley, with the Marble Mountains rising to the north and barren, sandy, dry lakes to the south. A high green shows on Main 1 near Saltus for BNSF 8217, leading a westbound train SLPC LHD. It originated in Logistics Park, Illinois, and is bound for Los Angeles Harbor. It is 7,270 feet in length and weighs in at 9,768 tons. South of the Marble Mountains, the former town of Cadiz was named in 1883 by Lewis Kingman, locating engineer for the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. It sits at an elevation of 791 feet. A pair of crossovers are located here, and BNSF 6225 leads an eastbound Z through the control point of West Cadiz at milepost 649. Cadiz is a junction with the former Santa Fe line that connects Phoenix via Parker, Arizona. Today it is operated by the Arizona and California Railroad, which interchanges cars here with the BNSF. Empty stack trains out of Phoenix, known as repo moves, are also seen, and this afternoon we are in time to catch one, slowly pulling through the siding and onto the main. This is train BPHX SBD and is bound for San Bernardino. BNSF 4605 West slowly enters the main, while the conductor remains behind to line the manual switch behind the train. A crew hauler will then give him a ride to the head end once the train is clear. This move does tend to tie up traffic, and the BNSF dispatcher often has the crew wait until higher priority Z trains have passed. 9 engines are on the point of this light repo move. Phoenix must have had a surplus of power, and they are being sent to where they are needed on the BNSF system. A mile east of the crossovers, the Cadiz local is tied down on the west leg of the Y. It has a train headed off by the Arizona and California. The local runs 5 days a week, and today the crew has the day off. The former station at Cadiz is long gone, but a few foundations are left as well as a palm tree planted to beautify the area. It has a front row seat to the busy Transcon. The heat of a desert afternoon wears on as we set up along the Arizona and California track, awaiting for today's train out of Parker. It usually arrives in the late afternoon or early evening, and we hope to catch it before dark. From the Y track, we continue to watch the busy main line. The desert is a lonely place. Silence falls on the land in between passing trains, and one can almost hear the shadows growing longer. Looking south over empty rails, we know it is a race against the coming darkness. In the desert, patience must be a virtue. The once hot desert sun turns the sky amber before being snuffed out for the night. An eastbound stack train notches up for the 1% grade that is the beginning of the next big climb to Goffs. In the distance, a westbound chases the sun toward the dark flat feature of the extinct volcano known as the Amboy crater. What the desert lacks in water and vegetation, it makes up for in light. Another westbound slowly heads through East Cadiz on the block of the train ahead. It soon disappears behind the eastbound. The last rays of the dying sun fall upon the Ship Mountains as the eastbound stack train takes a northeast course through Fenner Valley. Watching the train disappear, silence again settles in. To the south, a glimmer of light appears where there wasn't one before. On closer inspection, we plainly see the train is finally coming. With the setting sun, the blue hour descends on the desert as ARZC number 3999 leads its train onto the west leg of the Y. The Arizona and California began operations in 1991, when the line, consisting of around 297 miles, was purchased from the Santa Fe. Its main commodities are petroleum gas, steel, and lumber, handling around 12,000 carloads per year. The 3999 wears the familiar Genesee and Wyoming paint scheme, reflecting their ownership of the railroad since 2012. Two other locomotives in this consist, a former SD45 and SD45-2, still wear the older paint scheme. The cars are spotted on the west leg of the Y for the BNSF Cadiz local to pick up. Once they are tied down, the power take the siding and turn on the east leg so the lead unit is facing south. The crew will sit and wait for the Cadiz local to arrive before returning to Parker. The next day, we are greeted by the cracked earth of a dry wash, which runs through the floor of the Fenner Valley, between the Clipper and Old Woman Mountains. The railroad takes the same course through Danby and Essex as it slowly climbs the long grade of Goffs Hill, reaching the summit nearly 40 miles in the distance. A gleam of light dances in the heat of the midday sun as BNSF 7244 West leads train QCLO LAC between Danby and Cadiz. This stack train originated in Clovis, New Mexico, and is bound for Los Angeles. It enjoys easy running on the 1% downhill run from Goffs. As we continue east, you will notice a pattern to the station names. They are mostly alphabetical, starting at Amboy. Bristol is no more, then Cadiz, and now we have arrived at West Danby. BNSF 7475 takes Autoracks east. The train meets the BNSF 4643 on the point of the SLUB SCO. These double stacks originated in Lubbock, Texas, and are bound for Thenard, California, near Long Beach. Moving on to E, we arrive at Essex, or rather, what's left of it. Like so many railroad Route 66 towns, Essex is a shadow of its former self, showing signs of also becoming a ghost town like so many, a victim of Interstate 40 and the more recent closure of the old Route 66 due to several washouts near here. Among the dilapidated buildings stands the Essex Post Office, serving the few people who live nearby. On the railroad, Essex is milepost 626.2. A Barstow to Galesburg, Illinois train races east with an interesting locomotive consist. Continuing our eastward journey across the Needles subdivision, the valley widens at Fenner, elevation 2,100 feet. Looking north, the Mojave Wilderness stretches out before us. The 1.12% grade continues until reaching the summit at Goffs. At nearly 2,600 feet above sea level, Goffs is the highest point on the Needles subdivision. Like many towns we have seen along the line, Goffs is mostly empty except for a small museum just off the main road. Among the weeds are artifacts of the town's mining past, including an old restored schoolhouse, originally built in 1914. East Goffs is located near the summit of the grade, and BNSF 4620 leads an eastbound Z train on Main 2, after being held for track work between here and Klinefelter. After cresting the summit of Goffs Hill, the railroad begins a 1.44% downgrade to the Colorado River at Topak, east of Needles. BNSF 6696 West leads train QNYC LAC through Homer. This coast-to-coast stack train has two Norfolk Southern units in its consist, an ES40DC number 7643 and an EMD SD60E number 6994. Rebuilt in-house by Norfolk Southern with a 16-cylinder 710 G3B prime mover, the unit has a unique sound. At Ibis, Mains 1 and 2 again separate for a short distance before coming back together at the Highway 95 crossing known as Arrowhead Junction. On Main 2, we can see mileposts 595 and 594 fairly close together. This is so both main lines have an equal length on the timetable. In the distance, a westbound works upgrade on Main 1. The sound of hard-working diesels is lost in the desert wind. BNSF 7533 West works hard as it climbs through Ibis on Main 1. BNSF 8318 glides down the east slope of Goffs Hill with empty ethanol tanks on Main 2. A few cholla cactus dot the hillside above Klinefelter as the railroad cuts through a narrow canyon below the Dead Mountains. BNSF 7256 West climbs through the canyon with the ZALT SBD. The train originated in Alliance, Texas, and is bound for San Bernardino. In the evening light, it rounds the curve at Klinefelter. Exiting the short canyon, the railroad follows the path of the Hacienda Wash before ducking under Interstate 40 near Java, the J in the alphabet. BNSF 8365 has just departed Needles with a Chicago to San Bernardino Q train. Nearing the end of our journey, the Needles finally come into view. This distinctive group of rock pinnacles inspired the name of the town, although they are actually in the state of Arizona along the Topak Gorge. The city was founded in 1883 with the coming of the railroad and is located along the older Spanish Trail. From our vantage point west of town, we can make out the Colorado River, which carves the border of California and Arizona. At an elevation of 495 feet, Needles is the lowest point along the subdivision, which ends in Needles Yard. A fresh crew takes a westbound Q train out of Needles on the number 1 track and will soon be arriving at our location. With the Mojave Mountains in the background, BNSF 7468 leads westbound train Q CHI LAC for an evening run across the Needles sub. A third main line begins at West Needles and heads to the south of mains 1 and 2. BNSF 4032 leads a westbound UJOE-WAT with ethanol loads for Watson, California. A pair of light engines glide down Main 2 above the string of tanks. They will diverge onto Main 3 once the ethanol train clears. BNSF 5621 leads an eastbound Q train with domestic containers down Main 2 into Needles. Just west of the yard, all three tracks come back together as a nighttime stack train begins its evening run over the Needles subdivision. As it departs with a clear block on Main 1, eastbound grain empties glide down Main 3 after completing their run across the Mojave Desert. Our final destination is Needles, milepost 578.4. The 1908 El Graces Hotel stands in a state of repair adjacent to the yard and serves as an Amtrak station for the Southwest Chief. This is a division point, with a Seligman sub continuing east into Arizona. Crews based here can work both east and west, including a long pool to Bakersfield, over 300 miles away through the Tehachapi Mountains. Our final westbound, BNSF 7429, has just made a crew change and begins a morning journey across the Mojave Desert to Barstow. The task of the railroad is singular: move a great many things from one place to another. It does so efficiently over steel rails which connect the nation. The allure isn't just the trains themselves, but the unique stories that are hidden in every grade, every curve, and every milepost. The Mojave Desert is a treasure trove of old ghost towns, mines, and forgotten grades. Those who travel this vast and empty land can still hear the lonely call of a whistle and feel the pounding of the great herds of iron horses which still roam the Needles subdivision. Until next time, thanks for watching.